on the music and technique side,
Yeah.
which one is?
Oh, well, technique allows you the opportunity to create a broader spectrum of music.
Oh,
You know what I mean? But
Okay.
music should be the first and foremost goal, at least that is for
Okay.
me. For a while there, I think as guitar players, we get very involved in technique. And I think that's good. I think that's good to a certain degree. But if all we're doing is working on technique, we might forget about the music side. So it should be a balance. A great technique will help you have more flexibility in the type of music that you do play. The music I gravitate towards and the players that I love they may have a tremendous technical ability, but they don't always use it or overuse it. But technique can mean a lot of things. Technique can mean shred, incredible virtuosity, or it could mean technique. It can also mean just really playing the simple things beautifully. If you just by being able to play a simple phrase. That's not necessarily easy to do. You know what I mean?
it's not easy to do.
There's a lot involved in that. It's a very simple phrase, and it doesn't sound like much, but that's a lifetime of touch and dynamic within the string. But that's a different type of technique, but it's all very valid. It's valid as that's exciting too, right? But so I like a balance of that. So it's good to work on the technique and scales and such, but it's about that application. It's making music with those tools, because technique is just a tool. It's not music, right? But with the right direction and the right application, then it can be a special experience, that becomes more than the actual note or the technique. It becomes an experience and maybe an emotional one. If done correctly, right? Yeah.
Okay. And how about the harmony? Guitarist must learn harmony?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it doesn't have to be a theory course at school, but you learn harmony by learning songs. You know what I mean? John Lennon and Paul McCartney never went to music school. But they did because they learned hundreds of songs. And so they may not have known, what a 2-5-1 was, but they used it, right? When they did if there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do, just call on me and I'll send it along with love from me to you. I got arms that long to hold you. Now what just happened there? That was a 2-5-1 to the 4 chord. They didn't know what that was. But for a pop band in 1963 to write that. But how did they learn that? Well, they learned a bunch of other songs. They were playing Chuck Berry stuff and Buddy Holly, but then they were playing 10 Hours a Night in Hamburg, so they had to learn, literally hundreds of other songs, and they would learn show tunes and things with more jazz harmony. So they were, again, they didn't go to school, but they were learning harmony and figuring things out on their own. So again, talking about the ear and just kind of learning those things. Now, that being said, there's nothing wrong with learning theory and learning harmony. But I mean, I think that first and foremost, the importance is just learning the songs. And sometimes because we have so much information available to us all the time. I've had students come to me when I started teaching again. There was one guy that came in with a stack of books, Like I took the online Berkeley course, and I every scale, every theory, every blah blah. Oh, okay. Let's just play. He didn't know what to do.
Okay.
You know, so that's an extreme case, but that's a true story. It's like he didn't quite. No, we just need this. That's all we need. Now, without pentatonic, we can make a lifetime of music. Now, I mean, look at Stevie Ray. I mean, he didn't do much beyond that, but he did it better than anybody else because of the passion and conviction. So it's not, you know, we don't have to know everything. We just need to know a few things and really play that as best we can, and then add to that. You know, I think sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed. You know, I remember when the Ted Green chord book came out. It's like I'm only now. Yeah, it's like the guy was a genius. He was quite a savant. But you couldn't possibly even begin to think about using all of it. Whereas my guitar teacher wrote a chord book, and there was like 4 or 5 versions of each type of chord in the key of G. And here's how you move it around. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, now I can use that. Okay, you know. Okay, those are G major 7. Right? Anyway, so, you know, I encourage people, to learn about harmony, but learn songs and then take care of the basics and add to that as you go. You know, I think that's a good foundation.
Okay. If you're not a guitarist,
maybe I'm not. I don't know. That's not up for me to decide, I guess. But
maybe you are a writer or something. Yeah.
I really. It's impossible to say because my span of interest is so focused. You know, it's so focused on music, and again, I think it's because of my older brothers were so into music, and they were my heroes. You know, I grew up around them. My father and mother divorced when I was very young, so they were my male influences. And it was all about music. So I think part of it was they inspired me, but I wanted to impress them. You know, so that became just everything to me, and. So I really have no idea because I don't have that much of interest in anything else. Of course, I would have found something to do. You know, I studied like mechanical drawing, and maybe I would have gotten into architecture or something. But I'm so blessed that I knew very early on that this was my passion, and I was also very blessed that my mother, who was raising 4 boys on her own, she saw me doing this and encouraged me. She didn't discourage me. She said, whatever it is you want to do with your life, just go for it, 100%. And so, you know, here was I had Kiss. I would buy every rock magazine. I cut out all the Kiss pictures. All 4 walls, I had Kiss pictures on the wall. And I'm playing this music, and she was like, she saw that I was working hard and was into it, so she supported it. And I'm very blessed, and thank her for that. You know, I'll never forget that. I've been very, very fortunate with that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. On your signature guitar, it look like come from a Strat.
Absolutely. It's very steeped in Leo's original design. I think most guitars you can trace back to the 50s with Leo less. Right. And so it's definitely the shape of the neck is more of that vintagey style, but then it's got all the modern kind of stuff. They're all well, this has been changed, but it's going to go back to the Cruiser, I think. But they're humbucking pickups in a much beefier sounding bridge. So I love Stratocasters. I have a 1965 Strat that I use in the studio, the white one. But I couldn't play all of my music on that. That's a very special sound and a beautiful sound. But when it comes to, you know, the style that I've developed over the years, because it's modern rock with some vintage, this guitar is it for me. You know, it really is. And so I'm very very pleased that they're still making this. There's still a signature AT100 and AT10 guitar, and it's changed a little bit over the years. I used to have Spurzell tuners. It's got the Goto tuners on there, and the humbucker was originally a Jeff Beck, a Seymour Duncan. But then I eventually collaborated with DiMarzio and came up with my own signature pickup. And I have coil tapped it now. That's just a coil tap switch for the bridge pickup, and it really works well. And usually I'm like, I don't know if it's not like authentic sounding, but it really is. It sounds great like that. So, and it's been refretted about 8 times.
8 times.
8 times, yeah. And it's about It's going to be soon.
Okay.
But yeah, my original luthier is like, man, one day it's just going to just turn into dust. But yeah, it's been my main guitar since 1994. I play other things like we had the AT300, got the mahogany guitar for a while, and I had, like I said, we were talking about guitar collection. I've got some different old vintage guitars, and like I've got a '68 Telecaster. And I use it a lot in the studio for recording sessions. So there's certain pieces I use, but as far as playing my own music, this is really part of me. It's really part of my sound.
Yeah. Okay. How many guitars do you have?
I don't know, but I know it's probably around 100.
Okay.
Right? And I know that sounds crazy to say that. So I'm a bit of a pack rat. I did for a while that I was collecting vintage Ibanez guitars. I could find them cheaply at pawn shops back in the 1990s. And then there's quite a few prototypes from different guitars along the way. But there's probably about 10 or 15 that I use consistently. A few vintage Fenders, and I've got a Les Paul and a Rickenbacker 12-string, and a couple of different Gretches and an Epiphone, and some nice acoustic guitars. I've got a beautiful old '63 Epiphone Texan, which is the same guitar that McCartney played Yesterday on. So anything Beatle related, I'm like, I gotta have that. I've got a J160E Gibson guitar like John Lennon. So those are the kind of things I like to use in the recording studio. But in all the other guitars, I just hold on to some for sentimental reasons, like a couple of Kramers for my Danger days, and some prototypes. But there's a smaller group that I use a lot.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay. What string do you use?
These are Diodarios. I've been using Diodario now since the early '90s, probably about 1990, and they're just 10 to 46. Okay. The EXL 110s. Yeah.
And what you pick? What
the pick is this is the most consistent part of my tone as far as the signal chain. I've been using this pick since 1984. It's the Tortex Jim Dunlop 1.14, and so it's got that fine point on it. It's not my favorite sounding pick, but I've developed so much of my technique around this specific shape that I have a hard time really grooving like this with any other pick. Like I love the sound of a Fender Extra Heavy or certain picks with more mass, but I don't have quite the articulation. So I use. See, the edge of my fingernail is always worn away because I'm using my nail and part of my flesh here. So it's not so much pinch all the time. But I'm feeling the flesh and the pick is hitting the string. I'm getting some dynamic there. Harmonic. So yeah, it's a combination of all that. But that point's really important to the detail and the harmonic content I get.
Okay. This question maybe is very hard.
Okay.
If you have must have only one guitar.
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, of course this one. I mean, this, clearly this is the one. I mean, again, I love just almost any guitar, but especially anything 50s and 60s vintage. There's such a romance attached to all of them. The Les Paul and the Strat, the Tele, and I love them all so much. But this is the one guitar I can go and do any gig with. I could do a country gig, I could do a jazz gig. I mean, this is a beautiful jazz tone, don't you think? I mean, just if I go to the neck pickup and roll the tone back a bit, it's very versatile. Very versatile. I'm very happy with it. So yeah, this would be the one guitar, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Do you have a philosophy or motto do you use in your music life?
I think that there's lots of things I think about as far as philosophy and ways of living, and I think that again, the older I get, I realize I behave the same way musically as I do in life. And I mean that I'm always very, very, very aware of not only myself but everybody else. And so what I mean to get at with that is that, this if I'm just walking through a crowd, I'm able to make sure that I'm navigating in a way that is courteous to everybody else. And it's very musical. The more I think about it, the more I realize that, some of these things, and I see other people, maybe I'm around some other people that they're not as aware of that, and they're maybe bumping in or stepping in front of somebody. And it's the same as music, but the more aware you are of everything else around you and how you fit into that situation, and the more sensitive you are to it, I think the deeper the experience can be, the more musical it can be. You know what I mean? This is the first time I'm trying to communicate. You asked me this question, and I've been thinking about it. And this is the first time I'm trying to communicate it verbally. But I think you see what I'm getting at in that, that same sensibility that I have in the world is the same as music, where I want it to be okay for everybody. I want to be respectful of everything around me. You know what I mean? And that's how I fit into musical situations. And that's something that's, if it's somebody that's only concerned with themselves, they're going to play that way, right? And that may be okay in the right situation, but because I navigate the world like that, and because I navigate music like that, I think it's helped me, do the best I can in each situation. Because it's not about just what you're doing on the instrument or where you're going walking. It's what I'm doing in relation to everything else, and how does that fit in, and is it helping or getting in the way? Are you getting in the way of somebody, or are you dancing with that situation and making a better overall situation, right? I hope I'm communicating that correctly. I think I am, but that's a life philosophy that I'm just now becoming aware of. That's the same in music as it is in just everyday life, And the other part of that is that the world it's becoming more divisive, with what's happening politically and things, some things socially. But my basic concept is that everybody you encounter deserves respect. Everybody deserves integrity. Everybody's looking for love, and it's so easy to be positive and make a good difference in somebody's life instead of negative. And if we all treated each other that way, that would improve things. I'm saying that from the standpoint of an American, especially right now, because things are becoming very divisive in my country. But if we just could treat everybody with mutual respect, and I see that so much in the culture here. I see that there's a very respectful way of addressing each other. So when I travel to Thailand, when I travel in Southeast Asia, I feel more, I feel a bit more simpatico in some ways than how I've kind of felt with my life, than I do maybe in some other parts of the world. But there's good people everywhere, and hopefully we're drawing towards each other. So, but I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the good interview and questions.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Andy Timmons. Yeah.
และนี่คือบทสัมภาษณ์ของ Andy Timmons ตอนนี้เราก็ได้รู้แล้วค่ะว่าวิธีการเล่นแนวการคิดทัศนคติของเขาเป็นยังไงแล้วก็หวังว่าทุกคนจะเอาความคิดของเขามาประยุกต์ใช้ในชีวิตประจำวันของทุกคนได้ค่ะก่อนจบรายการก็ขอฝากกิจกรรมดนตรี OVERDRIVE Youth Band Contest ครั้งที่ 1การประกวดดนตรีเยาวชน Generation C กติกาก็ง่ายๆค่ะอายุไม่เกิน22 ปีสมาชิกไม่เกิน7คนแล้วก็ส่งเพลงมา1เพลงจะเป็นเพลง cover หรือจะเป็นเพลง original ก็ได้ชิงเงินรางวัลมูลค่า 100,000 บาทส่งผลงานได้ใน inbox ที่ Facebook OVERDRIVE Youth Band ปิดรับผลงานวันที่ 20 ตุลาคมนี้ค่ะสำหรับวันนี้ก็หมดเวลากับ OVERDRIVE Live สโลแกนของเราก็คือ Music is not what I do it's who I am ดนตรีไม่ใช่สิ่งที่เราทำแต่คือสิ่งที่เราเป็นหนูทรศาค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ